Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to far north Thailand, the Golden Triangle Asian Elephant Foundation. As you can see, I'm not in my usual posh Thai gear this afternoon. I'm in my gym gear, and I am not actually, as you can, well, unfortunately, I am not. Golden Triangle is a bad place to be. Unfortunately, I am not with my rangers behind me because, as a lot of you know, we are on the first day of our run, walk, crawl for rangers. The gym gear isn't really a publicity stunt. I am going to run home from here to get some steps in because it's been a bit of a lethargic day. We will talk more about the run, walk, crawl for rangers later on in the course of the rangers. But for now, this is an elephant professional lecture. And we are going to talk to, Vijo Varghese is going to talk to us about his project, which I haven't yet had a chance to visit, but I've been hearing a lot about, and it's a subject that's close to my heart. The Cardamom Tented Camp is part of the subject matter as well. I think in the way that privatized land can be used to help conservation. In this case, particularly elephant conservation, and presumably some tourism in there as well when tourism exists. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Vijo, and he will tell you all about his project and the impacts for privatized land on conservation, particularly of Asian elephants, but of entire ecosystems. I know he's a bit of a snake man as well. So over to you, Vijo.
All right, let me start. First of all, thank you very much, John. I must say it's an absolute honor to be here. I think I've been watching so many of the talks on your, on your page, and I must say, absolute honor to be here, to be, presenting at GTAEF. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of information. I'm going to present, and can you see my presentation now, John? Is that? Can you get? Oops, sorry. Hold on.
Not yet.
Sorry.
Not yet.
Share screen. Share. There we go.
Hold on. It's loading, and we have it. Okay.
Yeah. You guys have it. Okay. Loading for a second. All right.
Good to go.
Okay. Good to go. All right. Well, first of all, once again, like I said, thank you, John, for this opportunity. And today my chat's about privatized land conservation and impacts on wild Asian elephants. I just wanted to start off by saying that this is not a topic just for elephant experts or anything like that. This is for anybody who loves elephants, right? Because 6 years ago, when I was in the corporate world, if you told me I would be here talking on GTAEF, I would tell you that you're crazy. But it's happened and it's here. So a little information. We'll start off with a little information about the organization. Our Land has got two core missions. I can put that as number one. It is to protect and reestablish wild spaces. And secondly, possibly even more importantly, is to increase human-wildlife coexistence. Now, as you can imagine that human spaces are expanding, wildlife spaces are decreasing. So coexistence is really important, as we will bump into the wild world pretty soon. So definitely one point to remember, that these are the two things that our core is about. People always ask me, what does Our Land do? So I'm going to give you a little bit of information. So number one, we run the Our Land Reserve. More on that in a bit. We run an education center inside the reserve. We do run an eco-village, which is aiming at self-sufficiency, 100% self-sufficiency. We do have a snake rescue center. It's called Serpentine. We do work on human-elephant conflict mitigation. And this is a thermal image of some of the elephants that visited the Our Land Reserve. We do have organic rice growing of our own as well. We do collect trash. We are trash collectors in the local community. We do events occasionally, and we are restorers. So we do reforestation of jungles. We work with international educational programs. We work with local kids in the area, teaching them about everything we know. We work with the critically endangered banteng, right? Wild cattle, of which only 500 are left in the wild. We do work with bats as well. And besides that, the bees and even our feathered friends, birds as well. This is a whole bunch of things that we are into. We are located, it's very important, location is important. We're located right at the bottom tip of the Salakpra Wildlife Sanctuary. Now, some of you might know that Salakpra is Thailand's first government-owned wildlife reserve. It was set up in 1965. And as you can see in that picture, that whole picture is the Western Forest Complex. Salakpra is right at the bottom of it. And the Western Forest Complex is one of the largest contiguous forest ranges left in Southeast Asia, right? And that's where we are, right at the tip of it. And we're kind of at a location in which on one side, you have civilization coming up, and on one side, you have protected area, which is the Western Forest Complex itself, right? So we are right over there, right at the bottom of Salakpra. Human-elephant conflict is rife within the area in Salakpra, but there is hope because studies do suggest that if enough forest patches are interspersed within landscapes, landscapes shared with people, crop raiding may not happen. So that kind of tells you that right now there is a lot of crop raiding, and that's happening because of the fact that there aren't enough interspersed jungles. The elephants are aiming straight for the food zones, right? I call them the buffet zones, right? So, and this you also have, Salakpra is a sanctuary with many edges. If you look on the map on the right, you notice that higher up, that's the Western Forest Complex, and you see the red dots along the way, and that is villages in the area. Salakpra is surrounded by 30 or more villages, while wildlife sanctuaries further up, don't really have village borders. So this can be a big problem, especially with Salakpra, because so many people from the villages are going in to harvest stuff, and not only that, so many of the elephants are coming out as well. So quite a bit of an issue. Where does our land come in? So our land here is the red dot in the picture, right? And how does this all make sense? If you look on the top with all the animals, that is the lowest end of the Salakpra Wildlife Sanctuary. And the yellow line that the arrow is pointing to is the highway. It's the main highway in the region. And now, if you look at all the way at the bottom, you see a river. The elephants and the animals are obviously trying to get down to the river for a drink of water, while as they go down, they occasionally end up in the farms. And in the farms, they get explosions, right? So these explosions are set up by farmers, there's firecrackers, occasionally it's gunfire, right? The idea is to keep the animals out. Our objective is to create a corridor along the blue lines in the picture so that the animals have a safe passage all the way from the top down below to the drink of water and head out again. For the Our Land Reserve itself, I want to say that this is a 2015 picture when we first leased it. I want to add that initially we were leasing the site. We just finally took over ownership of the location just last month. So that's a very new thing and very happy about that. We finally have the plot of land. The total area is 9.09 acres. Now you can see in the picture that when we got the piece of land in 2015, it was pretty much farmland that hadn't been used for about a year or 2 years. On the right, you can see that we have left it completely untouched. The technique we use is called ANR, Assisted Natural Regeneration. And you can see that it's much, much greener now, 6 years later. So, and I also want to show you a video of my first and second experience with wild elephants after I moved into our land. I moved into our land about 6 years ago, and this is my first and second experience with wild elephants. Okay, all right. So as I said, first and second experience. I want to move on into, oops. Yeah, I want to move on into not just talking about elephants. I think elephants are so easy to fall in love with. They're this big megafauna that are in the region, and they're so cute. So it's easy to fall in love with them. But let's not forget about all the other animals. Now, all these pictures that you see were taken inside the Our Reserve by a photographer called Jono Dashper. Thanks for coming down and taking these awesome pictures. And now, if you notice that some of these animals are resident in in the Our Reserve, some of them are passing in and out. The point I'm trying to make is that animals don't know boundaries, which is why privatized land conservation, or at least strategic privatized land conservation, really works, because animals don't know that this is a wildlife sanctuary, this is a boundary, this is where I've got to stop, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Animals don't know the boundaries, right? What is IUCN's view? Now, if you're talking about an authority on the topic of conservation, you have to talk about IUCN, and a few words about what IUCN is saying over here, right? So number one, IUCN has said that specifically defined protected areas, IUCN calls it PPA, privately protected areas, as protected areas under private governance, with a protected area being an area of land especially dedicated to the protection and maintenance of biological diversity and of natural and associated cultural resources, and managed through legal or other effective means. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, some other organizations also call this PLC or OECM. So I think PLC stands for Privatized Land Conservation, and also there's OECM as well. So that's IUCN on that topic. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about globally protected areas. This is not a new thing, right? This is not a completely new thing. This has been done. And one of the biggest foundations known to do this is called the Tompkins Conservation Foundation. And they did the largest ever donation of private land to the public in Chile in 2019. That was 10 million acres of land. And that's enough space to put 5 national parks in place. It was done by Christine and the late Douglas Tompkins. Because they already had some of the fortune with them, with brands like Esprit, the North Face, and Patagonia. They own these brands, so they were able to use the fund from that into protecting what they loved the most. So this is privatized land conservation at a very, very big scale, right? But let's bring it much closer to home. Let's take a look at what's over here. So big hats off to the Bird Conservation Society of Thailand, because in 2019, BCST purchased 8 hectares of land in Paktale in Phetchaburi, because this land was sustainable wintering ground for the spoon-billed sandpiper and other globally threatened shorebirds. Now, very special place, right? And this place is also being used for education, while it's also improving the livelihood of local people. So hats off again to BCST for having been able to do this, right? And another one, much closer to my heart, and also a person I'm a big fan of, we call him Momong, or his actual name is Dr. Rangsarik. And Momong had set up the Nam Kam Nature Reserve in the Golden Triangle, so actually pretty close to you, John. The Nam Kam Nature Reserve is a total of 11 hectares. So that's about 80 to 90 rai in space. And it was primarily for reedbed and wetland birds. Now, if you take a look at what's around the Nam Kam Reserve, you'll see really badly degraded ecosystems, because primarily everybody is growing pineapple and cassava. So all these birds and other animals, not to forget, are flocking into this. And you can almost say that Momong set up one of the first, possibly one of the first protected areas in Thailand by setting up the Nam Kam Reserve. All right, so now moving on to another spot in Thailand, which is Our Land itself. I wanted to point out that Our Land has a total of 5 locations that we actively work upon. We have 4 plots in Kanchanaburi. If you look on the left, Our Land is in the green potchy bit, right in the middle. You see that little green spray painted bit, and that is the Our Land Reserve. It is located in a housing project that went bankrupt in 1997. So all the squares that you're seeing is actually housing projects, little plots that were supposed to be penthouses that actually never took off. Now, if you look at the bottom, there's a green little rectangle at the bottom, closer to the river over there. And that's also, there's two plots over there run by our land, and another one is in the red spots that you see up over there. We're still working on that. More info on that coming up soon. And another plot we have is in Kuiburi. If you're a true elephant lover, then you've surely been to the Kuiburi National Park. And it is an amazing place because it's the only place in Thailand that you can get into the back of a truck, hop in safari style, drive, and then see elephants and a lot of gore as well. So we have a rented plot there right next to the national park, helping to expand the national park, and currently is rented out to bring the elephant home for the research that they're doing as well, right? So those are the plots that our land has. Now let me explain one important question. Why does privatized land conservation even have to be there? A lot of people ask me that, because the common idea of protecting land is something that we have given to national parks. So national parks, to governments, to wildlife sanctuaries. We believe that it's the government's job, or big organizations like WWF or IUCN, to be actually protecting land. It's not actually our job to protect the land, and how could we possibly do it? And this idea comes from a long time ago. This idea of protecting land is a fairly new one, because we absolutely need to. If you look at the research down here, it is increasingly apparent that government action alone will be insufficient to reach global protected area targets, and that private entities have a significant role to play. So think about that. We've got to change our mindsets. We cannot depend only on government and conservation organizations to do so. We've got to take an active part in it as well. So that's why privatized land conservation. So what are my objectives with this presentation, now that I've explained a little bit about it? Number one, I want you, the listener, to be empowered to get involved in privatized land conservation. It can be done just the way I did it. Number two, I want to explain that the coexistence is the key. That is the key to all of this. And number three, we want to showcase the importance of working towards inclusion and mutualistic solutions. Now, one of the things that I often, I guess that small land conservationists like me, we always get blamed that you guys don't do enough research, you guys don't do enough of the homework, you have to do enough, scientific and do your homework really well. Which is why today I came with a fair amount of research extra on this topic, which is critical perspective on land conservation. Now, don't get freaked out by the web over here on the right. I'll explain that in a bit. What we have done is there is a review written by Jennifer Gooden, a specialist in private land conservation. She has combined 57 different papers about the topic and taken a look at what are the issues, what are the subjects that are coming up when we talk about privatized land conservation. And 3 of them have mainly been pulled out. There are many of them. If you look on the right on the image inside the web, there are lots of them connected to each other. But the main ones are effectiveness, cultural conflict, and economic efficiency. So let's take a look at those 3, right? So number 1 is effectiveness. You're protecting a tiny plot of land. Just, maybe you as one person or a couple of friends coming together. Is it going to be effective? That's a good question. Number 2, value conflict. You can come in and want to protect land. You might have a conflict in so many ways with the people around you, right? So that's a possibility. And number 3, inefficiency. The fact that sometimes small-scale conservationists are not well researched. You sometimes tend to be inefficient. That can happen, right? So number 1, the first thing is effectiveness. Small, fragmented, and unimportant. So that is a point, because we're really small. We could be somewhere far away, like disconnected from the rest of the world. And number 3, unimportant. So that's one of the problems that they say that that is not really well thought out. This is where I say that land conservation needs to be strategic. It's not about randomly protecting any plot. And the thing is that as a conservationist, that's very hard for me to say, because when someone says, should I protect this plot? I want to say protect every plot. But the thing is, you need to think this through, which is why I need to come also and say that privatized land conservation is not a solution for everything. It is an effective tool that you can use in combination of other conservation efforts. In the case, in this case, in our case, in the case of our land, we believe it's an effective tool because all the land between the highway and the river is private. If you're able to privately protect that, that will be of strategic importance, right, for the biodiversity in the region. So that's something to think about. We're too small to be effective. This can be a problem because sometimes when we're not a big organization, you're not working with the government, you're not working with the local government or the national government or other organizations. So for example, something very unfortunate has happened recently is that if you look on the picture on the left, the red line is a fence that is coming that will come, it is 15 kilometers long, and it will completely block out all the elephants trying to come for a drink of water at the Kwai River. You can see that at the bottom of the picture, you see the Our Land logo right there. And that's where Our Land, and even that area is going to be completely blocked out. That's very sad. The fence is going to look like, if you look on the right side, bottom right, you see a gentleman touching a pillar. Those are the pillars that are going to be in place, and they're going to be connected to each other by metal sling wire, very strong sling wire, so elephants can't get through. That's just one. Another one, take a look at the highway, the yellow and the red line on the top right. The highway is expanding. So you're going from two-lane road to four-lane roads. Occasionally a national government prerogative, and they put that through. But it's unfortunate for the elephant, especially in this case, and it makes it much more difficult for conservationists like us to support the biodiversity in the region, right? Number two, effectiveness, just funding, which is a really important thing because every organization is having funding trouble, especially now through COVID. But PPAs, or privately protected areas, have extra trouble because sometimes they say they don't plan it out well. And one of the reasons that they say they don't plan it out as well is it's not just about buying the land. How do you conserve the land in the future? That's something to really think about. And so from our side, we obviously also have funding issues as well, but we have currently funded about 30% through crowdfunding, 14% from educational institutions, and the remaining from private investors in co-op mechanisms. So we combine private investors together to help us support buying land. Another thing is that we're not only waiting on donations to come by to run the Our Land Reserve and the protected area. We also have our own limited liability company. That means we're also an operating company, and we're involved in ecotourism, education, permaculture, and agroforestry. The permaculture and agroforestry are fairly new ever since we just acquired the land. That's what we're actively working upon now. And also, one of the things that besides the main plot, the other plots, we use low-cost assisted natural regeneration, which basically means you just take the plot, you make sure it doesn't catch fire, and you just let things grow in that jungle, right? So that's what assisted natural regeneration is, ANR. Now, funding, of course, as I mentioned, is a problem. Now, I'm going to show you a video to explain why sometimes funding can be a problem for us. All right, so just to point out that camera traps can be expensive. Working with elephants can also be troublesome because they can sometimes crush your camera traps, and therefore funding is definitely very important, right? So, oops, moving on. All right, another topic that's commonly brought up is skills and resources information. You're a small organization. You can't expect to be hiring scientists and specialists in the field and all that to bring in. So that's kind of a tricky one because there's so much information to learn here. There's spatial data, you want to learn about your land, hydrology, how the water is going, if you want to learn about permaculture, many things to think about. And that can be a bit of a problem for private landowners or conservationists. Number one, we are actively managing the land. So I live on the Our Land Reserve. I've been living there for the past 6 years. So we are actively managing the land and learning from it. We're constantly bringing in experts. As of date, we've got experts in geospatial data analysis, bats, elephants, snakes, birds, trees, and insects. I just want to add out to anybody out there who's thinking about private land conservation. The beauty of private land conservation is that when you tell people about what you're doing, a lot of people really want to help because they understand the heart that you're putting into this topic. So don't be let down if you don't have experts. You can just reach out to experts and ask them, please help me. I need, and that's how we have met so many amazing experts in the field, right? So, but we always have to continuously keep learning. And one thing that I also want to talk about is integrating local knowledge. It's not to be overlooked. The local people have been here for generations. They know a lot about the wild spaces here and the jungles and the flora and the fauna. So definitely that's a knowledge source that we all should absorb information from. Don't just look primarily at only the scientific side of things, right? Value conflict. This is a conflict in several aspects, and it can be a difficult one. There are big words: neocolonialism, inequality, economy, and employment. What it basically means is that when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, a private land conservationist comes in and says, I'm going to protect this piece of land. It's going to be my style, my way," which means that no humans, only animals, nobody's allowed in. This is where conflict usually starts. And sometimes it's difficult to deal with these. And that's also important why you need to integrate the local community. Inclusion is a really big thing. Get the community around you included into that. How are we dealing with that at Our Land? Now, here's one situation. Every year, they have a special mushroom that grows here at Our Land and our surrounding area. It's called het cone. The het cone can fetch you over somewhere between 400 to 800 baht per kilo. So it's really high in value. And we allow the local people to harvest het cone from the local area, from the Our Land Reserve, but they cannot dig all the way down to the termite base, right? With the termite, if you dig all the way to the termite base, you might get more mushroom, but you end up killing the termite base. So we're picky about that. Also, another plant called a tree called the white popniac, which local people use for livestock. That's something that we also tell them they can go ahead and cut it down because it is an invasive species as well, but they need to use it for their livestock as well, and it grows really quickly. Another one issue that we kind of get stuck in the gray zone is honey harvesting. I've tried to tell honey harvesters around the Our Land area to cut only half of the hive, not the whole of the hive. And this is a really tricky problem because when they go up there, they do all this work to climb up the tree, take a coconut, smoke it up, put it there. And the thing is that people just say that it doesn't make sense. I want to cut all of it. So they end up doing that. We do have some issues on that, but still working on that. Locals also understand land boundaries. So that's a good thing when we explain land boundaries to them. One of the issues that clearly arises is hunters and trappers in the area. And this is something that we're still working on transitioning hunters into conservationists, right? How do they make it worth it for them to be conservationists and not hunters, or at least controlled hunters? That's another topic. On a side note, on the economy and employment point, I wanted to point out that Our Land hires 4 full-time staff, and before COVID, we had 20 part-time staff supporting for ecotourism in the area, right? I want to point out that this is all about coexistence once again. The world is interconnected and interdependent. Land conservation is just part one. The part two that really needs to come along with that is coexistence. And one good start is to remember that we are in the edges of a wildlife sanctuary. In the edge, there's always conflict between what's inside and the people living outside. What we're trying to create is buffer zones, harmonious buffer zones that are integrated and more compassionate. How do we be more compassionate? If you look in the picture in the middle, that is agroforestry. Agroforestry is primarily when you combine agriculture with forestry. So you have something that gives you food as humans, and also for the animals as well. If you look on the right, we have some camera traps, but a little more advanced. We are hoping to get this project going in the next 3 to 4 months. It is completely SIM card operated camera traps that alert us on our phone when megafauna come by. So when an elephant comes by, we know about it. This ensures our safety, right? So this is also a part of coexistence, ensuring our own safety. And of course, can't help but talk about my lovely dogs. And this is Copy over here. The idea of having dogs, using an animal that is better than us in terms of senses, which has been with us for 35,000 years. We can use dogs to sense if there's elephants around, and then when they start barking, we know we have to take precautionary measures or safety measures, right? So on that note, maybe want to show a little bit about one of the dogs at our land, and here we go. All right, so that was how we use our dog. Now moving on to the next topic, green grabbing and control of land, exclusion and elitism. Now this usually happens in the case, for example, the Tompkins Conservation Foundation, which I mentioned about, the biggest land donation ever, did kind of face this topic over here. And the idea is that somebody from outside, it could be anybody, it doesn't have to be a Thai person, it could be someone from Bangkok, comes in with his own ideas, comes in, buys a piece of land and tells the locals they can never get inside, and only the elite, that is either my own friends or a bunch of rich people, can come in and come into the reserve. So this is something we want to avoid. First of all, this is a complete opposite or antithesis of what our land is about, right? Because for us, it's all about bringing in people. And also, not to forget that this was supposed to be a project like that. This was a housing project that went bankrupt. What we're doing is returning these plots slowly back into nature, allowing communities to walk through them and harvest some of the things that ecosystem services that they can receive over here. Also, land ownership is not the final objective. We are focused on human wildlife coexistence. So it's not all about grabbing as much land as we can. And the whole idea is to integrate community. Last point, I promise this is the last academic point, we're moving on, and economic inefficiency. Is it protected forever? This is a very tricky topic. Someone asks you, should land be conserved? Should any plot of land be protected? The conservationist in me wants to say, yes, protect land, any kind of land, protect it anywhere. But as a strategic conservationist, maybe that's not how we should look at it. There are some places that are better suited for farming. So if you're taking a big plot of land that's in farming, and then you, right in the middle of it, you protect a small piece of land and turn it into a jungle, it might not be the best idea. So that's something to really think about, strategic positioning. And you don't want to protect a piece of land that causes some other place land to be destroyed. So if you're protecting land here, the farmer, to meet needs, will have to go and clear out a jungle somewhere else. So think about that. So is it protected forever? The next part itself is permanence. Again, back to the first topic. In Thailand, we have different kinds of land documents. You have the Kut Dang, Kut Kiao, Kut Dam. You also have Noso Sam, Noso Si, Chanot, Sokon Nung, Paboto Ha, which is a whole bunch of paperwork involved. Look into that paperwork really well. And also think about what happens once you have protected land and you're going to pass it on to who? When you're gone, when you have left this body, who is going to take care of that land? And is that land going to be going back into the commercial world? So that's one way to think about it. With our land, we are currently working out this detail as well. Some of the plots are privately owned by our land, and some of them are also privately owned by our land as a limited liability corporation. as well. Also, the objective of our land is to move into being a social enterprise or a non-profit. So that way, we can one day ensure that the plot is protected, so-called forever, right? And next question is private land conservation really possible? The best example I like to talk about in this case is if children can do it. On the left over here is a very good friend of mine called Kerry Dyke. Kerry teaches at the International School of Bangkok. And earlier this year, Kerry and a bunch of kids jumped for elephants. So what they did is they told the students to jump for elephants, and then they took all their jumping and they went to sponsors and said, will you pay me this much money per jump? When they got that money, they took that land and gave it to us for direct protection of land. So stay tuned for a plot of land that'll be coming up with the International School of Bangkok. And once again, a big thank you to Kerry for making that happen. The question that I commonly get asked by kids is, how much land should I protect? Because kids really like the idea of land protection, and how much land should I protect? And it's the same answer I can give some adults as well. The answer is 16 square meters. Why is that? Because the amount of area required for one tree is about 4 square meters. You need 4 trees to produce enough oxygen for you. So 4 times 4, 16 square meters is the amount of land you need to protect, at least at a minimum, so that you're at least doing your part for the air that you breathe, right? So that's one thing in. But now, if you think of that, how much does that cost? That's the big other question that I always get asked. How much does that cost? And that is 1 square meter of land in Thailand with the deed will cost you between 150 to 250 baht. So if you're talking about 16 square meters, it's 2,500 to 4,000 baht. That's not a very big amount of money. Now combine that with the fact that if you have a few people, like 100 people, so that's just 100 people, that'll give you 1 rai to protect. 100 people paying up 2,500 baht, you're able to protect 1 rai. That's not a very big amount. So I really want people to think about the fact that that's a big take on conservation right there, right? And now what I showed you was a very small project, a bunch of children jumping, but privatized land conservation can also be really big. This is one of my dream projects. A big thank you for the team member, McKinsey, on the team for working on this one, in which what you've got over here is that if you see the red line that I showed you earlier before, that's a wall, that's a fence, right? I think it makes perfect sense to have a corridor over here to allow animals to go through past the wall and get to the river's edge and go back out. And you can combine that with things like beehive fences and eco bridges, which would kind of solve so many problems. But like I said, this requires the combination of several entities, several organizations coming together to make this happen. And I surely hope that one day we can get this done, right? Another point for privatized land conservation in terms of a roadblock is I call it the jungle tax. What that basically means is that the Thai government does not want you to leave land idle. So any piece of land that is basically untouched will get taxed a little higher than land that is being used for agriculture, which is the reason why a lot of secondary forests are just chopped down and turned into agricultural land. This can be a bit of a problem if you don't want to pay your taxes, but there is a way around that. And to bypass that, you can go to ecotourism, right? So by putting in ecotourism and stating that that piece of land that looks like jungle is being used by you in ecotourism, you can state that there's a running business on that plot. So that's something to think about. Takeaways from this, as I come to the end of this presentation, is the value of nature. I think nature, really important is that nature doesn't have to be pristine and devoid of humans. We have this new age concept of thinking that humans are bad, that that man is not nature, but that's not true. Man is nature. Man comes from nature, so we are a part of that nature. So when we think of a green space, that green space can have humans, right? It's just that the humans have to exist in the right way in that space, right? So that's something to constantly tell yourself, that it is about coexistence. It's not about looking at humans as bad and plugging yourself out, right? And I wanted to come to an end with one thing, that one of the common things we always discuss in the conservation world as well is HEC. So human elephant conflict is a big problem. But remember that human elephant conflict is not a problem. It is a symptom of a much, much, much bigger problem. And what is that problem? That problem is land use. We are really inefficient at using land. We're really bad at using land. We're inefficient in agriculture. And if you look at Thailand and Vietnam, between 1973 and 2009, 43% of forest was lost in the greater Mekong subregion, right? So, and most of that was lost due to agricultural expansion. So this can be quite an issue, because we are all, me, you, we're all a part of this expansion. We live our lives without thinking about stuff. We go to the supermarket, we buy stuff, when we buy things and we do things, we don't realize the amount of damage we're doing, because on the other end of the funnel, somebody is cutting down a jungle. Somebody is cutting down a jungle to plant more agricultural stuff. And I see land conservation as a way of bypassing that problem. We might bump up against that problem later when people say, hey, you don't have enough land to do any more agriculture, but that's a big economical problem. You can talk to an economist about that. And I have some friends who are economists I've been talking to about, and the conversation can go on for hours. So just wanted to say, for me, privatized land conservation is a way to bypass many of these land use issues to ensure that at least some land is protected, right? So I want to end by saying that conservation is for everyone. We all have a part to play. Let's make a greener world, one small plot at a time. Thank you, and back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Vijo. Fantastic presentation, fantastic work. Thank you so much for showing us and talking to us about it. I guess a quick question from me, and I think the answer, I think you've already answered it anyway, but I'm going to ask to get you to answer it again. It's long been a dream of mine in some areas where we're working to extend almost exactly as you have the area of a protected area by either ourselves taking over unused plots of land or renting them from the current farmers who are there because they're grumbling about losing their crops. So it should be possible to put a sum together as you have and said, okay, this is what you will make from this land and you'll have the headache. Can we rent it from you and extend? Now, my big worry from that is we don't, the areas I'm thinking of don't have a river to get to. So if we do that, even if we get a plot of land like your own, my worry would be that in extending the national park, we would be just shifting the problem. The elephants would then move on to the next neighbors. So I guess the question is, have you had conflict with your neighbors who are accusing you, or are they accusing you on the left and right hand side of encouraging the elephants to come out of the forest and therefore closer to their land that they felt was safer before you got there? And how would you work with that, and how would you get around it?
I think first let's look at I see some raw data. So one raw data is that fortunately Thailand is in a unique position in which the population of elephants is on the rise. So we're from last numbers that I've seen is anywhere between 7 to 12% per year, right? So that means that elephant numbers are on the rise. So you're not going to be able to stop that outflow of elephants. So increasing land mass is unfortunately kind of like seems like the only solution. I mean, unless you want to trap them in a smaller amount of space and just keep them there and push their densities up, which can cause enough amount of harm. And that's kind of tricky because we know that on average the wild Asian elephant requires between 100 kilometers to 250 square kilometers of land to go around. So it's a tricky one. Have I been accused? Absolutely. I think that I have had neighbors asking me that, and I understand my neighbors who are primarily farmers, who tell me about this problem that they're dealing with. My point to that is that there is no way in which you're going to stop that movement. So the important thing to discuss with the farmers is about a replacement of their crops, and this is a very important one. And we have two organizations. One is Bring the Elephant Home, which is working on this. A good friend David Owen from Bring the Elephant Home, who is working on chili paste and a whole bunch of other testing plants that they're testing out. Another one is Pipom Kunrachaya from the Department of National Parks, the Puluang Research, and she's also got a plot. I think it's the 11-rai plot that is testing for growing turmeric and ginger and things that elephants don't want to eat. So I think that's more of the right way to go, because the other way almost seems to come out of fear. And I guess that the classic question of fear and love, which position are you in? So, but it kind of applies here, that you can't be in that mindset of fear, like, oh my God, elephants want to come. What am I going to do? The more coming out, you have to go in the fear of like, okay, they're going to come anyway. Got to accept that. How am I going to deal with it? And yeah, I try to convince the local farmers that saying, hey, this stuff is much more lucrative as well for you, because if you sell it, there'll be someone to buy it. So I think that's one of the things that we have to kind of educate our farmers as becoming part of the problem. And hey, how do you part of the solution? How do you put them into part of the solution? And I guess maybe on our last note to add in about the direction on which, that is definitely a tough one in terms of like, where is the nearest river? Do you head towards the river? I think until we do proper that is why I feel like geospatial analysis is really important. You need to analyze that, the per location, what can the elephants do, or where can they go? Yeah, that's very important. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Actually met Freeland are also doing something similar at Surviving Together down in, and last time I met both Kunrachaya and David in the same place was down at that as well, a small project we helped to help the sponsor down there. So yeah, that's a great answer. Unfortunately, I think it when the local authorities come along and offer to build a fence, which in a way is sort of, I would say perhaps futilely, and I think you'd agree, doing exactly what you just mentioned of trying to keep them behind the fence and then build up densities, and it's going to be counterproductive, and they'll get through the fence one way or another. Is there any chance of them building, diverting that fence and going down the sides of your land so you remain a corridor, or is that something that hasn't been discussed yet?
Well, like I said, I think one of the things with being such a small, privately protected land is that it's difficult to get into these big discussions, and also these are. I mean, like the concept of the wall is coming from a very local audience. Right. The local people are putting out so much pressure, especially because in the past 1 year we've had 5 deaths related to human-elephant conflict. That puts human death always puts a heavy toll. Much heavier than elephant death, of course, right? And that puts a lot of pressure on the local government to act, and yeah, it becomes a political issue. So for sure, I mean, ideally, I'd say yes, please send the elephants this way. You're more than happy to have them here, because as John, you would know, ecotourism is definitely one thing to integrate into all of this. It can be. I think Kuiburi is one of the most beautiful examples of a human-elephant conflict solution that was solved with the combination of ecotourism as well.
Yeah, certainly working towards being solved down there as well. Okay, thank you very much. I will now turn over to the floor. Are there any questions? Could you unmute yourself and ask them if they exist? Or Nisa?
So far, I don't see any question. But very good feedback. Everyone very excited about this, your talk.
Thank you, Kapunu.
Okay, well, good. Well, hopefully, actually.
I have a question, I think.
Oh, well done, Nisa. Hi, Nisa.
Yes. So I saw on the plan that is actually there's going to be both the fence that is going to be built, and also there is going to be some sort of highway that is also going to be built that actually pass through the area where the elephants will be walking over to our land itself. Does
Yeah. So
is that going to, I guess, it definitely will affect how the elephants are going to pick and choose where they go from now, I guess. Do you think that this will be, I don't know whether this will actually create another problem where the now abandoned, bankrupt village that your guys are situated nearby, that is probably, if say the highway is finished, then you guys might not be able to use that land anymore because now there's money that potentially can be made, I guess. Is that something that is kind of like position?
I guess that's
moment?
like a catch-22, right? You mean like
Yeah.
a two-way problem? Yeah, for sure. That's always there. And also just to point out the picture that I showed with the eco bridge and all that, that's the dream. That
Yes,
we're
I know.
hoping that one day it can work out. As of right now, what we do know for sure is that the wall will be put in place. Hopefully in the next, not hopefully, unfortunately, in the next 1 or 2 years, they will put the wall into place. Some pillars are already in place right now, but yeah, I mean, like for sure, land prices have gone up already, and I guess that is also one of the reasons why I want to send out, send a word out to everybody who's listening, that land protection is very important, because I see this in the past 6 years. I drive up from Kanchanaburi to our land, which is 28 kilometers away. Every a week I'll at least go twice, and it is sad to see the number of plots that you can actually see just being wiped out. Like, you just don't realize how fast development is destroying things. When you're in the city, it's hard to see that because everything is already developed. So it's not much change there. But when you're out of the city, when you go down a green strip, then you can kind of see the amount of damage that's taking place on a regular basis. So on that note, I would also like to urge everyone to take an active effort in land conservation, please.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think, well, I don't know, from the elephants that we have on site with John and everything, our elephant actually eat they eat wild gingers, and some of them actually eat turmerics that I've seen.
Yeah.
They only eat the trees, but not the roots, but it's interesting. But
Yeah.
I think for the wall, I'm pretty sure that if they don't plan to do, I guess, electrified parts of it or something, they will go for the pillar first, because they know that the metal sling, might stop them, but the pillars, that can be worked with.
Yep, absolutely.
Push it down, they'll push it down. We've seen it.
Yeah.
That's what people say, that it will be pushed down, and not only that, over time rain will erode a certain section away, and they'll find a way around as well. And I think on the point of the turmeric and the ginger, I agree. I think some percentage of it will be eaten by the elephants, but compare that to corn, cassava, and sugarcane. The percentage would be much, if I remember right from a document that I read from Bring the Elephant Home, which David sent to me, was that only 8% of the plot that they planted was damaged by elephants. Yeah. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and that's always the big worry. But it's all with any of these alternative croppings or any of the solutions, is that nothing is forever, I don't think, apart from what you're doing there and the ecotourism, because the elephants sometimes eventually learn to eat it, or it degrades the soil or anything else. But you've got to try. If you don't try, you get nowhere. And as you say, 8% is better than 50%, and as long as the farmers are aware of that as well. So it's a very, very interesting experiment. I will have to come and see at some point. I've been planning for a year or two, but there's this little disease going around that's stopping that.
I have one. Not I. Dr. Pichet has one question.
Well, he would know.
Do you have an approach to avoid elephant habitat with people in private land?
Habitat too. I think that to start with, one is having dogs really helps. I haven't put some more. I haven't put some more videos of dogs that I have a little bit more crazy, because we have 3 dogs, and sometimes we've had 5 dogs. I think that's a really big deterrent. Elephants do not like living with elephants. In the past 6 years, I've realized the one thing they do not like is a group of dogs, and so that is something that we also try to make sure that we regularly have enough dogs around, because being in the wild, the dogs can also get occasionally hurt by the wild elephants. So that happens. That has happened in the past. I think dogs are definitely one thing, and absolutely no keeping of food in an access point that elephants can easily access. Yeah, definitely, that's one thing. Like I have known that they will come into our kitchen to open the window and take out the banana that's inside the kitchen. So that's that's something that we've experienced personally. So on that note, I say that keeping food away and keeping dogs definitely is this thing. And one more thing is water. We try to ensure as much as possible that none of our water sources are open to the elephant. So it's either in metal tankers or in concrete, completely protected from elephant. So the elephant doesn't start to create a pattern that, oh wait, on the way to the river, I can drop by our land eco village and drink some water and go out. We're okay if they do, but we try to protect it as much as possible. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
So the idea, even during tourism or anything like that, is that you and even though the elephants are using it and that you are using it, that the elephants and you're using it a bit like some work was done around in Nepal, that humans use it at one time and elephants used it at another time. So you're using it separately. You don't interfere with one another's lives, so they don't get used to you.
Yeah, because I think that it's also a safety concern. We do have I took out some of the videos because there was too much, quite a bit of content, but we have a small pond with a few fish. Every few times I have to fill up fish into that pond because they get sucked up by the elephants and they're gone. So that's also something we try to prevent. And even in front of the pond, I've put an automatic sensor light, so that when the elephants come in, it scares them away with the turning on of the light. So we do have a genuine safety concern involved, primarily because of the fact that we are known to have an elephant that has taken lives in the recent past. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Another question actually from Martin. Apart of following your page like Overland or Donate, what else that we can do to help?
What else can we do to help?
Help to answer some question now, but in case that people are watching this live from YouTube or other channel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we would, well, besides the fact that we would love to have volunteers come over and help us out, spread the word is definitely important, right? Spreading the word as much as possible, and to also maybe turn their eye towards conservation. See, the thing is, for me, when I first started this plot, we rented the plot at 50,000 baht for at that time they told us it was 30 rai, and it was per year, right? And the idea of conserving it for such 50,000 baht was peanuts. So we went ahead and did it. I think that people misunderstand how cheap rental land is in Thailand. An average plot of any kind of farm or any kind of location usually is between 1,000 to 2,000 baht per year for one rai. That's a small amount of money for a big plot of land per year. And if you can kind of get an agreement for 3 years or 10 years, that's a beautiful start already, because you're protecting a small piece of land. If you can work with the owner and tell the owner that maybe I can plant some trees there too, and the end of it you can get the trees too. So that's how we started. And just this year we raised enough funds to secure the land itself. So I would say, if you can in some way consider land conservation in your part of Thailand, wherever that is, that would definitely be the one step forward. Besides that, please do come on over to our land. We have an online education program which you can join. we're hoping to reach out to a lot of people focusing on conservation and sustainability. So yeah, that's definitely another one that you can help us out with our new online education program, thanks to that little disease that John mentioned a while ago.
Yep. We're mainly, well, here we are online, which is, I mean, that's the silver lining, is we get to talk to you. Well, I'd have talked to you anyway, but we get to share the conversation with people around the world. So that's another silver lining of this little disease.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, that's all. That's our question. But I think you might have to come back and read on Facebook. There are many message and comments, and I think some good knowledge from here as well.
Okay.
Hopefully a few people will be in touch as well directly, and if anybody is out there that knows us, and if you want to be put in touch, just contact us and we'll put you in touch and sort of see if we can come up with some answers. My last question is about Banteng. Where do you find your Banteng? How are you involved in Banteng?
Oh, we are primarily just doing the English education side of Banteng. So at the time that Banteng was in operation already, when we started over here 5-6 years ago, there wasn't really any English content for the Banteng in terms of a proper explanation of what it is and an educational side to it. And that's something that we specialize in, nature or conservation education. So that's what we did. We created an English with English subtitles and English presentation so that people, not just the Thai population, because there's a lot of interest from the Thai population already in the Banteng. So that people not from the Thai side who don't speak the local language can also learn about it. That's where we were involved in primarily. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, cool. So I think that is, if there are no further questions, I think that's it. The only thing left for me to do, sorry for spamming everybody who hasn't been part of it or has been part of this for the last little while. The one bit that is very, very important when it comes to land, to private land or public land or protection or all those other things, is enforcement. On a small bit of land, I guess you guys are able to do it yourself to a certain extent. But when we get onto larger bits of land, then the people who go out there and do that around the world are known as wildlife rangers. And we are running a small fundraiser going on throughout the month of September. It's a virtual step challenge. So this isn't for you, Vijo, you know all about it. This is for people out there. So you don't have to do anything, but continue to live your own life, and you count your steps and you put it up there. It costs $25 or 800 baht to enter. We have started counting our steps now, which is why I'm in my gym gear. But you can add retrospectively. So I think you have up until the 5th to sign up. And all you have to do, as I say, is pay your 800 baht, register, and then count your steps throughout September. We have over $45,000 worth of prizes, very generously donated by mainly Anantara and Avani, but certain other hotels around the world. Tiger Tops in Nepal, which is another, this is not private land conservation, it's community land conservation, but they're right on the edge of a buffer zone for Chitwan National Park, and run by a very great friend of mine. So very, very key, very, very a lot of linkage points with what we've been talking about all the way through. So please do, ladies and gentlemen, sign up. Our 5 ranger teams that we're talking about are Wildlife Alliance, who are working in Cambodia, Freeland Foundation, who I mentioned earlier, who not only work on the similar things to David and Kunrachaya, but do it down in Khao Yai. They also train a lot of rangers in law enforcement and safe operation. Musungi Geo Reserve, which I think is private land. If not, they have the right to be operating on their land, that land by the government, but I think it's privatized land at conservation for the watershed above Manila. Randalan Wildlife Management Area, which is a community-owned wildlife management area in Tanzania, but managed as a private company for the community. and our own cardamom tented camp, which is on 18,000 hectares, which again is leased. It's not our own private land, but it is private land. So it all ties in there. So 5 great ranger teams. We're raising money for them, and you can get to have fun and you can win great prizes. The prizes are on lucky numbers up and down the leaderboard, so you don't have to be super fit. So a quick plug for that, and hopefully one of the team who has a thing will be putting the link up, and you can join that. So sorry, Vijo, to sort of interrupt your lecture, interrupt your great talk by talking about our little thing. I will hand you back to you for the last word, so everybody remembers you and doesn't remember me.
No, but I think that's super important, John. I think that people, like, as it says, that once you acquire the land, the important stuff is what you do with it afterwards. But that's also a really important part, and I must say that, yeah, so we'll be signing up for that too. And I guess my last words are just exactly what the page says. Conservation is for everyone. Everybody chip in. And I just want to add that I know that the children ask me this a lot, right? The children ask me this a lot. They're like, what is the one thing that I can do? What can I do? What can I do? And one thing I can't help but say to them, and this is on the same topics of the idea of land use. We talk a lot about land use, the inefficiency of land use. And the reason for inefficiency of land use is primarily the finger is pointing back at us, in which our usage of things are just high. And I can't help but tell people to go all hippie on it, and that, you know, we must definitely find a way to decrease our needs as well, despite all the other things we're doing. And one way to do that is to meditate. Because, you know, just as you meditate, you're a grateful person. A more grateful person is much happier with lesser things. That's simply the cause of it. You know, just to leave it at that, is just, you know, so, you know, 10 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of meditation a day, you're a happier person. You need lesser stuff in your life. The earth is a better place. Yeah.
And on those words, goodbye, everybody. Thank you very, very much for watching.
All right. Bye, John. Bye, Kunu. Bye, Nisa.